Hello everyone and welcome to JavaScript Days. My name is Mark Guzmano. I'm a sales engineer with Sencha. And in this session, we're going to discuss how to use the ExtJS components in a React application. And as we get started, the first question you may have is, why React? Well, a recent Stack Overflow study back last year ranked React as the most popular web client-side framework or toolkit, and you can see some of the numbers on the screen there. And React itself has a lot of really nice benefits. First of all, it's relatively easy to learn the basics. It has some great developer tools in the ecosystem. The idea of a virtual DOM is prevalent in React and really adds to some of the performance benefits of React. There is a great story on data binding within the React application environment. It's a very strong community of support within React. It's very SEO friendly. The rendering engine is very quick and very fast. You can build very robust performant applications, and it enables and supports reusable components. But inside React itself, there are really no reusable components. There are definitely no components that are data-centric reusable components. So the real question is, when you use React, what component library or what components should you use? So I want to make a case for reusing the ExtJS components within React. A lot of you maybe have used or are current customers for ExtJS, and really the core to ExtJS is its rich set of UI components, data-centric, data-oriented UI components. Things like the grid and tree views and charts and many others. About 140 plus components that are within the library. The ExtJS components have been around for a while, and if you have used or are using ExtJS, you already know how to use these components, and wouldn't it be nice to be able to use that knowledge as you venture into building an application in React? Well, that's exactly what we have in what we're calling React ReExt. It's essentially the Sencha ExtJS components within React. And as this evolved, there were really two guiding principles to what we wanted to build and what we wanted to produce to allow you to use the ExtJS components within React. We wanted to make it very simple, and we wanted to keep it very flexible. So let me first talk about simple. What does that mean? Well, the ReExt components are really just one component. It is the component ReExt. That component has 5 props: X type, class name, style, config, and ready. And every event you want to handle is an on X event, like on click, on tap, on select. So very consistent, very simple, and one component that really drives everything. We'll look at that a little bit more in a bit here. Reusability. We wanted to keep it reusable to the current base of ExtJS components that you may have already built. Perhaps you've built a custom component, a very robust component that you would like to reuse. You are able to do that with ReExt. You're able to take your ExtJS custom components that have an X type and use them within React ReExt. We wanted to keep the product available. It works out of the box. You'll see that to get up and started is very quick. There's no need to change anything in React. There's no need to change anything in the ExtJS SDK. It simply uses that SDK. And as you'll see, it's very simple to even upgrade to newer versions of ExtJS as those versions evolve. We also wanted to keep the product flexible. As far as versioning goes, we wanted to have the flexibility of you being able to use the latest version of React and any new version that comes out. We wanted that to be available to you as new versions come out. We also want that to be true for the latest version of the ExtJS SDK. We support all 7x versions, and as 7.8 is just around the corner, we have already tested and know that that version is compatible with ReExt. We wanted flexible licensing. We actually didn't want you to have to worry about any additional licensing. So your existing Sencha ExtJS 7x license covers you to use the ReExt product within React. We wanted flexible tooling. We want you to be able to use any build environment, current and future. So for example, in today's React world, two of the more popular tooling options are to use Vite or to use Create React App. And we support both of those, along with any others and any other way you might want to build your React application. The ReExt environment is delivered as an NPM package. A public NPM package is available. We'll see that in just a moment. We're also working on tooling in the form of a VS Code extension. We call it ReExt Designer, and we'll take a look at that in a bit as well. And then we want you to have flexible choices. We want you to use as much or as little of the ExtJS environment as you need and you want to use. You want to use the grid? Use the grid. You want to use all of the componentry? Feel free to do that. You want to mix and match what you're doing with other components that you found in React? Great. That'll just work. And we want you to be able to support anything within the ExtJS environment. So all themes and both toolkits, the classic and the modern toolkit, are supported within the XReact environment. So as I mentioned, the ReExt, the environment is available as an NPM package. So I figured that would be the easiest place to start. So let's go ahead and head over to the npmjs.com environment, and I brought up the page for the ReExt product. As you can see, there's a little bit of documentation here. We've got a couple of examples we'll look at in a bit here. There's a getting started guide with the VS Code extension. There's a quick start that does not require the VS Code extension. You do not need the VS Code extension to be productive with the ReExt environment, although it gives you that extra boost of productivity, as we'll see in a bit. Then there's a little bit more miscellaneous documentation down here. So this is a good place to start to give you an idea of what the product is all about. We've also put together a couple of examples that showcase the components and how they work with the ReExt environment, two of which I have links to down on this slide. We also have links to those on the ReExt NPM package page. As you can see here, there's an example here of the classic toolkit with classic theme and the modern toolkit with material theme. I'll click on the first one just to give you an idea of what an application may look like. So we're running a React project. We have kind of a kitchen sink type page here initially with a tab panel and multiple components within these tabs. Here we have a big data grid within ExtJS. If I click on a row, I can see some display fields. I have a pivot grid here in the enterprise components. This is the D3 visualization environment within ExtJS. We have a grid, or we have a chart here from the charting package within ExtJS. And just to call out the fact that you can have other components, this component is actually a third-party grid that you can actually install side by side. And you can see it works seamlessly. I have the ability to slide back and forth. I can easily incorporate other components within the environment. Also have an example here that uses the modern toolkit with the material theme. So again, both toolkits are supported. This material theme is available both in classic and modern. And one thing to note up here is that this application is using the latest version of React, 18.2.0. It's using the latest version of Ext JS, 7.7, and in this particular case, the modern toolkit and the material theme. So you have the flexibility to decide what you want to use, and we support that right within the React ReExt environment. So I'd encourage you to go through these examples just to get an idea of what's available with the React ReExt environment. Okay, so let's do a little hands-on. Let's go ahead and build an application with React and ReExt. And in this particular case, I am going to choose the Vite option that we have available as a set of steps on the NPM package page. So these items right here are essentially the getting started with Vite on the NPM package page. So let me go ahead and bring up a terminal window, and let's run through this just to get an idea of how quickly you can get up and running. So the first thing I'm going to do is create a React application with Vite. Vite is, as I said, one of the more popular tools to create React and other applications. I'm going to call it ReExt Vite, and I'm going to use the React template that is available for Vite. If I hit enter here, as you can see, very quick, it scaffolds a very, very basic React application. We've got step one out of the way. The next thing I want to do, and as you can see in the steps that are on the screen here, we want to go into the folder that we just created. So that was the ReExt Vite folder. So I just did a CD into that folder. This next step is going to install the React ReExt component. So npm install. And as this is the first time I'm doing an npm install for this project, it is also doing an npm install for all of the other dependent components that the project that was generated needs. So this is going to take a few seconds just to get all of the components out in the npm or in the node modules folder of your project. And as you can see, it added 326 packages, and we are ready to go. One last step I want to take just so that we can see ReExt in action is I'm going to copy 3 files into the project. I'm going to copy an app.jsx. I'm going to copy a main.jsx, which is the entry point into a Vite application. And I'm going to copy a JSON file that has some data that the environment will use. So those 3 copies were successful. And the last step I'm going to go to is to actually run Vite. And with the -- open parameter, it's going to open a browser window and basically run our application. So here's the application that those 3 copied files produced. Admittedly very simple, but on purpose simple. It's several ReExt components. We have a button here that as I click on it, it just changes the orientation from row layout to column layout. I have a grid with some data. And if I click on individual rows, I have 3 display fields here that will fill with the selected rows data. So this is the example that we're going to use just to get a feel for how things work. And you notice we got up very quickly. If we look up here in the details of what we're running, again, we're running the latest version of React. to get us up and running quickly, we're running a remote version of version 7.0 of ExtJS, which is the GPL version of ExtJS. This is probably not how you want to run, probably not how you want to develop. I'll talk about how you get licensed versions, perhaps the latest version, as we move forward here. And then by default, we're using the classic toolkit and the classic theme. So we've got an application running. We've got one available to us. Let's talk about what was generated. And in a bit here, we'll actually go into the code and look at it. As I said, ReExt is available as a single component, as a single React component, simply as ReExt. As you can see here, that's the beginning opening tag for the ReExt component. The closing tag down here in the bottom. Then we look at the props that are available. The first prop is probably the most important one, and it kind of guides everything else that's going on. It's the XType component. Again, those of you who've used ExtJS know XType describes the components that are available in the library. So XType button is a button, XType grid is a grid. So those are all available, and all of the visual components that are available in ExtJS will be available to ReExt just by using the XType that is for that particular component. We also have class name, which is the way you assign classes in a React component. You can add your own specific classes. You can add styling to the component. And then this component here, the config component, is where you put the configs that are relevant to the XType that you created. So in the case of a button, you may want a text field to show inside the button. You may want to give it a width. If you had a grid, you probably want columns and you want to store. So the things that you're used to, if again you've used ExtJS, are available as items you can put in the config prop within the ReExt component. There's a ready prop that will basically tell you when the component, the underlying ExtJS component is ready. And then any of the events that are available for a given component. So for example, for a button, a click event is available. And all of the components start with the prefix on, with then a capital first letter. On click, on select, anything that's available to that component would be available as an event prop. The other thing that's important is loading the application. I mentioned that in a Vite application, main.jsx is the entry point. And if you've built React applications, you know that to get things started, you do a React root.render of a component, in this case, the app component. And the React root is typically bound to the DOM element that's in your HTML file called root, or has an ID of root. So we're doing very typical things in this main.jsx. The things that are additional and that we want to do to enable ReExt is to load the ExtJS SDK and to make sure it's completely loaded before we load our first component. We take advantage of the async capabilities of JavaScript here, and we're running an async block that will import a file called reextdata.json. We'll see that in a moment. And then run a function that comes from the ReExt library called ReExtLoader. So this statement will load everything that's necessary for the version, the toolkit, the theme that you've selected to be run. Where is that selection done? It's done in this ReExt data file. So this next slide shows you what the ReExt data.json file looks like. And as I said, it's just pointing to the current SDK version, which toolkit, which theme. If you want to load any of the enterprise packages, you can load them individually, charts, D3, pivot, etc. Debug is useful, as we'll see with some of the tooling that we're putting together. And then the URL default is the setting that says get this SDK version from the server, from our server, so that things are up and running quickly. If you want to use other versions and you want to use your licensed version, you will change this URL to local. So local and an SDK version that you have local will run things in a local environment. And again, we'll see that in a bit here. So I keep talking about using a local version of the SDK, using the licensed version that you would have. I just want to briefly talk about how you do that in the current world. To get at an SDK version, you typically go to the Sencha support portal. So support.sencha.com is the support portal URL. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to go over to support.sencha.com. So let me go ahead and just type that in. And I've already logged in, I believe. We'll see. And this will load the support portal homepage. I guess I have not logged in. So I'll go ahead and enter my password. All right. And go ahead and sign in. And typically you go over to downloads. You can see here that I have a big button here to download the latest version of ExtJS. I can also download past versions. I also have an ability to download the ExtJS premium components. So clicking download here would download a zip file. And that would take a little while. So I'm just going to show you what got downloaded. So here's the ExtJS zip file. Here's the enterprise components zip file. I unzipped them and I got the unzipped versions of both of those folders. What I would want to do to enable it for ReExt is I'd want to take these two folders and I'd want to put them in the public folder of, in our case, of what I just ran, of the Vite application. Then I would go to that ReExt data.json file and adjust the parameters. So for example, if it's 7.7, this would change to 7.7. And as I mentioned before, the URL would be local. And then you'd be running against that environment. Certainly doable, but quite a few steps that you have to go through. And we kind of thought there'd be some benefit in putting together some productivity aids for things like this, for getting the latest version. So as I mentioned, we're putting together a VS Code extension that we call the ReExt Designer. And I'd like to show you what that looks like here in a couple of examples. So the ReExt Designer is available as a VSIX extension file, and you can download that from the same place that we were just a bit ago, the npm package folder. So let me go ahead and bring that up. Actually, let me, instead of sitting here and typing it, let me go back a few slides here and just click on this link. And you'll see here that the first section after examples is the getting started with the VS Code extension. And this link right here, if I click on it, will download the latest .vsis extension. And in my case, I will download it by default to the downloads folder. So that's step one, which is to get the actual extension. There is documentation here to talk about how you manually load that extension into Visual Studio Code. I've repeated that on this slide right here, and it's a pretty simple process. So let me bring up an empty version of VS Code. So this is VS Code with no project loaded. I am going to go over here to this extensions menu item and open up this ellipse menu and click on the last item that says install from VSIX. So that's where you install any VSIX. Here's the one that I just downloaded. I'll go ahead and click install. And as you see, it's a pretty quick install. I get a little toast that tells me that the extension was successfully loaded. And the first thing it's asking you to do is either open up an existing ReExt project or create a new ReExt project. So let's go ahead and create a new one. I'll go ahead and put it in this JS Days folder that I have. Once I've selected a folder, it asks me which tool I'd like to use. I'm going to use Vite just like I did in the manual steps. We'll go ahead and leave this to version 7. I'll use a classic toolkit, classic theme. I could optionally pick one or more packages. I'll give this a name and click create. So essentially what's going on here is the same thing that I did manually. It will run the npm create vite command. That was very quick. It will then, here on step 2, do an npm install of the ReExt component. That, again, takes a little bit of time just because it's also npm installing everything else. It did the copy of those 3 sample files and successfully created the project. Now I get a button that just brings me to an open instance of that project. So I'll go ahead and click on that button. And here I am in Visual Studio Code. I have the files that we had mentioned before. I have the app.jsx file, I have main.jsx, and I have the ReExt data.json file. We'll look at all of those here. I'm going to go ahead and click on app.jsx. So this is the file that contains the code for that very simple application that we saw. And I'll go ahead and maybe bump this up a little bit so you can see it. So here's the code for that page. You notice there are several ReExt components on here. You'll also notice that this edit tool popped up and is kind of guiding me through the page itself. You'll notice that it recognizes all of the ReExt components that are on the page. For example, here is a ReExt button. Now it's highlighted so that I know where the button is. This button has the props that we've discussed, has configs, and has events. So this tool gives you the ability to either review and update the props, configs, and events that are in the current ReExt component or add new ones. You can also click on one of the components within the editor, and now I've just selected the ReExt Ext type grid component, and now this is oriented towards that grid. As I'm clicking components, you'll notice that the ExtJS documentation pops up in the context of that component. So here I've got X type button, here I've got X type grid. If I go over to the grid configs, I click this filter button and I say, what is title all about? Contextually, it will show the documentation for title. One last thing I can do is I can run the application right from within Visual Studio Code. So if I click this run button, you'll notice that there's that very simple application, the same application that I just showed you a minute ago. There's the row and column orientation. I'm selecting individual rows. And you'll notice I'm running version 7 remotely. So this is how I get up and running very quickly. One other thing I'll show you, and then I'm going to talk about getting or acquiring some of the SDK versions that you may want to use instead of the remote GPL version, is this little button here, go to inspect mode. So if I click on this, you'll notice that instead of the page responding as it was built, I now get highlights for each of the components that are on the page. And if I, for example, click on the grid here, I am now in the context of the grid. I can click on one of these display fields. I'm in the context of that display field for, again, just a little bit of a productivity aid to help you understand and use the ReExt components that are on your page. All right, so that really is the ReExt Designer from the standpoint of how you use it very simply. I'm going to show you a few other things for it, just to give you a little bit more of an example of what's available. As I mentioned, you may want to use other versions of the SDK, other licensed versions that you may have. And so right within the designer, we have included an ability to go acquire the SDK versions just simply by providing your credentials and selecting which version you want. This is actually going to the support portal just like we did in a bit ago manually. So I'm going to go ahead and log in and provide my ID, provide my password, and go ahead and log in. So now I'm logged into the support portal, and it gives me the ability to select which version I would like to download. Let's just say, for the sake of argument, I want to use version 7.5.0. So if I click download, all the work of going to get the zip files, bringing those zip files down to your machine, unzipping them, putting them in the right spot, which, as I mentioned before, was the public folder of your React application, all that will be done for you. And when it's finished, all you need to do then is to simply change the parameters in that ReExt data.json file that point to, in this particular case, the 7.5.0 SDK. So this takes a few minutes. As you can see here, we say 1 to 2 minutes. It depends on, general performance. We're downloading a very big zip file in terms of the ExtJS SDK. Because I am an enterprise customer for my ID, it will also download the external enterprise components. And you can see here it took about almost a minute to download the 7.5.0 SDK. Not quite so long to download the enterprise components. And now I have successfully downloaded, and the files are in the right spot. So if I went over to my public folder, you'll notice that ExtJS 7.5.0, that folder and the add-ons folder is ready to go. The only thing I need to do to actually use these files is to modify the ReExt JSON, and we may even put some automation here so you don't even have to do this, but I want to do two things. I want to say that no longer is the URL the default URL, it's local, and I'm using 7.5. I have autosave set on my machine, so this change is almost immediate. And now you can see that this particular app is using, or this page is using 7.5 and the classic toolkit and the classic theme in a local mode. In other words, it's pulling it right from the public folder. All the functionality is still here. I can use the page, but now I have the additional features that are available in 7.5. As I said, the latest version of ExtJS is supported, and we've even tested against version 7.8, which will be out very shortly. One last thing I might show you just to give you an idea how you might use this tool is I'm going to go ahead and click on the grid and go over to configs and select the filter checkbox. You'll notice here that this grid has a title, just the word grid. Maybe I want to change that to my grid. Very creative. And if I hit enter, there's the change. There's the change on the page. Again, just a little bit of extra help just to get you going within the environment. All right, so that's really what I wanted to show you. The NPM package page is available if you want to begin using the ReExt product. We're working on several things with the Visual Studio VS Code extension, but feel free to download it. I would come back periodically. We're going to continue to make improvements to it. Or if you want to keep in touch with the updates to ReExt, here's my email address, mark.guzmano@sencha.com. Love to hear from you. Love to dive deeper if that's something you're looking at. So again, thank you for listening. We're excited about this product. And I'm going to turn it back over to our moderators to see if there are any questions that I can answer for all of you. Again, thank you again and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Okay, super. Thank you, Mark.
You're welcome.
That was a really, really cool presentation. I really like the Visual Studio Code plugin. That looks pretty cool. Which leads me on to one of the first questions that's been asked through here.
Yep.
Nimet's asking, would we be able to use Rider from JetBrains, or are we limited to Visual Studio Code?
At the moment, the first foray into this, we decided to use Visual Studio Code. It is a very popular, it's again, the most popular environment. But we have experience as an organization with JetBrains and a few others. That certainly is something we would want to consider. We wanted to get something out. We wanted to get something that people can use. So we decided on Visual Studio Code initially. As I said, you don't have to use the plugin. You could use the plugin on the side just to get some of the productivity features, maybe by getting the versions. It doesn't affect your code at all, and Visual Studio Code is free. So we're thinking that's a decent proposition initially, but again, we will consider other environments if they merit.
Awesome. And David asks, can you use ReExt app and submit it to the App Store for an iPhone?
Yeah, I don't see why not. Typically, though, if you're building a React application for a phone, or I shouldn't say typically, one of the more popular things you use is React Native. And React Native tends to use the native components that are on the device, but certainly no reason you couldn't use ReExt for that. That'd be pretty cool. And if you're thinking of doing that, let me know and we'll guide you through it.
A lot of comments saying how cool ReExt looks, which is great to see.
It's the logo. I know it is. It's the logo.
Does it work on Next.js as well?
It would work on Next.js. Again, anything natively React, anything that uses native React components, which Next does, would work. Yes. We haven't overtly built an example, but Next.js would be a great one to do an example on. So feedback like that, frankly, is very valuable. So we want to keep this open. We want to hear from you guys. We want to hear what things are important to you. So, make note of my email address. And again, if we don't have something overtly, we can work together to get things up and running. But the short answer, yes.
Okay. Another question here. What is the difference between Ext React and React ReExt?
Ooh, the question. I don't know if you noticed, but I said Ext React once in there, and some of you may be going, what's Ext React? Ext React is a product that we had that kind of was in the same category here. The idea was it was going to bring the ExtJS components to React. It's a deprecated product now, and there are several opinions and reasons why, but the opinions and reasons why we learned from, and they became our guiding principles. It was a complicated product. It required a lot of work when new versions came out. It was tied to Webpack and Create React App. So all those things that just, we felt were constraining, we tried really hard not to do. And I would say that was our stepping stone to the product here. I mean, in this product, simplicity, I think, will be its benefit because it doesn't get in the way, but it gives you all the power that you're used to with ExtJS. So this is the way that we recommend you using the ExtJS components in React.
Yeah, I think I'll echo what you're saying there. I think ReExt is just so simplistically simple in the way that it's doing the wrapping, but obviously it's like a paperclip. Once it's been invented, you go, that's so simple and a brilliant solution. And I think compared to the original approach, because obviously the market's moved on, the whole languages, the frameworks have moved on in a number of years since React was originally kind of conceived. And what React provides is just a
Yeah,
blazingly simple but flexible and lightweight kind of position.
right,
So it's
right.
really cool.
Yeah, yeah. Just one note. You said paperclip. It reminds me. I'm a little older, and I remember Clippy in the Windows environment that animated
Oh, I used to love him.
paperclip.
Yeah.
Anybody thinks we should put that into the logo somehow? I mean, it's a great suggestion. I don't think so.
um, okay. How can I use my existing custom ExtJS components with ReExt?
Ooh, great question. Great question. That there was that comment that I made on the slide, but I didn't call it out very much. Um, Actually, if you go to the documentation or go to the npm package page, there's a discussion of exactly what you just asked. So the idea is you've been an XJS customer, you like the product, you've actually built some custom components. A lot of people do enhancements and extend the grid, for example. If that is in an extended component and it has an X type, which it will, you can bring that in and that X type can be your custom X type. To me, this is one of the hugest things, especially if you're considering a move to React and you've been doing XJS. You don't have to rewrite your application. You just bring in these custom components. That example app that I showed you actually has an example. We did a book, kind of a book on Ext Mail, how to build an email client in ExtJS. I took aspects of that and brought the custom components in, and that's the example. So that absolutely, I would love to see people push the envelope on that if, there are things that aren't supported. And not only is it the component, so let's say you're bringing in a grid, you can also bring in its underlying store, the underlying models. You can even bring in view controllers if you want to go that far. So that was another lesson learned from what we had done previously. People who were moving, they said, I have to rewrite everything. We don't want you to have to do that. We want to encourage you to do whatever makes sense to you, but we want to give you the ability to truly migrate if that's what you're doing.
Yeah, I think one of the other things that really struck me when we were discussing React internally was that sometimes you kind of get a new project come along and you kind of go, well, the scope of what we want to do and what we want to use in this project might be slightly different to what we've been working on in the past. And you may have, really stable, really well-established central application using all the frameworks and everything within there. But you may want to start building some new stuff using React as well. So it doesn't mean you have to completely change what you've been doing. You can still keep using the whole Centra framework for doing your existing projects and still share source code between the existing project and the new one that you're building in React because of the whole framework that's here, which is, when you kind of start looking at it in that kind of perspective, that's mind-blowing. It's like, brilliant, I can use everything I've got here and use it over here as well. Without and kind of bug fix in one place and update both applications, that's a powerful way to be able to move forward.
Yeah, and it's not just components. Again, I touched upon this briefly, but you can use any theme. I don't think I said this though. You could use a custom theme. If you built a custom XJS theme, you could incorporate that into this environment as well. So a lot of what you may have done, a lot of the work you've done, I've talked to many customers who've said, our customers love the way the application works. They even want it to stay the same way from a look and feel. And you're able to do that as well.
So I think that kind of leads nicely on to another question that's come through here. Based on the presentation, it seems that you were mostly like using inline styling. Is it possible to use custom classes?
Oh yeah, yeah. You can. Well, we want, again, flexibility. We give you inline styling with the style prop. We give you class-based styling with the class name prop. You bring in an entire XJS theme, so you can do that. We haven't exhaustively gone through all the other ways you can do styling within React, but again, if it amounts to something that a React component can handle, and a lot of them act that way. I mean, you set class names, or you know, style components give you the ability to kind of put a style on top of a component. All that is just fundamentally what a component supports. And ReExt is a React component. So you have all those capabilities.
So I think you might have touched on this, but Harry here is asking, can the open tooling SDK be used instead of downloading the full SDK?
Okay, so open tooling is a product that we built to allow you to generate essentially ExtJS apps. Open tooling uses such a command under the covers, and it uses NPM packages to actually bring in the ExtJS. We consciously went this direction because, again, simple was one of our guiding principles. One of the other challenges of the work we had previously done was that the NPM packages sometimes weren't as simple to use as possible. You could bring in the NPM packages. You could do all of that if you wanted to. We're not saying you can't. As a matter of fact, you saw the way we're using the ExtJS libraries is very elementary, very basic, on purpose, because if you want to use other means, if you want to use the NPM packages that we have available, you can. We haven't overtly created examples, but again, another opportunity. If you want to do that, talk to me and we'll figure that out, and it'll eventually become an example.
Cool. Alexis is asking, is it possible to build web components with ReExt?
Yes. Web components is a technology kind of inherent in the browser. It actually gives you the ability to have a generic component that will work across frameworks. When we originally reimagined this product, the first thing we thought of was web components because, boy, we'd like to use this in other environments. Turns out that web components are great for single components, but as you start building more complex things, you lose some of the power of the individual framework or library. So we chose to use native React to build ReExt. Now, there are libraries out there that allow you to take a React application you built and make a web component out of it. So a really cool idea is you create a React application with ReExt, you use this library, and if you're interested about the specifics of the library, email me, I'll find it. And then that is the web component. So the answer is yes, and it's a lot simpler than potentially just building a web component raw. And that's a really cool idea. I like it.
Sounds like a great skill sprint for us to do at some point then.
There you go. There you go.
There we go. Talking of that, one of the things that the team here love doing is kind of feeding on some of these great ideas that you guys come up with and things that you'd like to see. So please, come through and send those bits through to us. Obviously, Mark's email's up on the screen. We're always on the lookout for some kind of cool webinar ideas, and quite honestly, the team love playing around with some of these things on the edge of technology and seeing how far we can push the envelope. So, do keep those ideas flowing in. Kobe asks, what about RTL? That was partway through the webinar.
RTL meaning right to left languages. That is supported by ExtJS, so no reason why you couldn't embed an RTL Sencha ExtJS component as ReExt. The library is there. That downloaded library or the downloaded framework SDK has the right to left stuff in it. That is not an option you can pick right now, but that's a very intriguing option. It would be relatively straightforward to do, but again, if you want some specifics on what's going through my mind to be able to support that, email me. We can make it happen. But yes, be able to support right to left.
Another question comes through here. You mentioned debugging during the presentation. Could you please further elaborate on how that works?
Well, first off, debugging is React debugging. If you turn on the React debugger, if you have the React extensions that are part of, I use Chrome for my work. Those all work. Again, this is just a React component. That debug word that you saw in the ReExt data.json file, we use that actually to enable the when I was in the browser that was inside of the Visual Studio Code extension, we use that debug word to say if you want to click on the overlay and be able to see kind of where the components are, that's what we use the debug for at the moment. There's also some JavaScript code that goes with it. So that's the specifics of why that particular element is in that file. But debugging, again, is just like you're debugging any React application. And underlying all this is ExtJS that has always had debugging capabilities. You can use the debug version of the library. You can use the release version. All that's available.
Another question here, are there any restrictions in which version of Sencha and which version of React you compare together?
We've tended to focus on the latest version. The latest version is actually for React has been around almost 2 years. So, our assumption was that most people would be using that or one of the previous very close versions, maybe 8.1 or something like that. We want to stay on the forefront. Again, one of the lessons learned from the last time was that, we weren't fast enough to get to the latest version. So we want to take that forward, both with React and ExtJS. But if you're using a very old, if there's some specific version and you're wondering, we'll have to have a discussion. I just would want to understand that.
Yeah, I think on the Sencha side is anything 7x.
Yeah, we decided on 7 since 7 is the current supported version. There's no technological reason that like version 6 would work or wouldn't work, but it seemed to make sense. Again, version 7's been out for a good number of years too, so we felt that was a good choice.
Yeah, I think one of the great things, obviously, the way it's been put together now as well. If there's a future beta release of React or Sencha, then you can try everything on that version ahead of time as well. So which is pretty cool.
Yep.
Okay, I think we've got down the core of the questions. There's a lot of comments coming through about thank you, Mark, for the presentation. Great stuff. Can't wait to get going with that. Again, if you want to get up and get going with this, if you go to the sencha.com website, under the products, you'll find a link for ReExt. In fact, what I'll do is I will.
Yeah, and feel free to email me. I mean, we're a bit informal on purpose right now. We want to make sure that we're very available and we can assist. If you need further discussion on this, please email me. That's the whole reason we're doing this. And we're going to find issues. We're going to find some things we need to fix. But as long as we address those, we'll need to get a little bit more formal in the communication. But for now, we thought it was a bit refreshing maybe to do it this way. That we're trying to innovate here. We're trying to get this out here. We know the people are going to dive into this, want the same thing. So we're looking forward to hearing what kind of things you want to do with React and ExtJS together. Mushed. What did Steven say? Mashed together.
Mashed together. Yeah. Okay. So great. Thank you ever so much, Mark. Amazing session as always. You're back on again tomorrow, I believe. You've got another one talking.
We'll talk about our newest product coming up called Rapid Ext JS, and it also is Visual Studio Code extension enabled. So look forward to that with you guys.
Awesome. Okay, so we are. Oh, there's another question just popped in. I was about to say we're going to take a quick couple of minutes before we get into the next session, but yeah. Is there any difference between using ReExt components and a React custom component when it comes to the file size shipped to the browser?
Well, file size shipped is going to depend on the components. We are dealing with the Sencha SDK, so that's going to be one aspect of what needs to be loaded. you probably in production, or should in production, use the minified obfuscated file. So from that standpoint, it's what you've been experiencing had you been working with ExtJS. Other components, they're going to have their own requirements, but the nice thing is you bundle it all together and it becomes one React application. And most modern web applications cache to the browser, so you see maybe a couple milliseconds the first time, and then it's all local. So I don't think performance from that standpoint is going to be an issue here. It's it's the way you build your application, and even that there are ways to do that the correct way. So
yeah, I'd certainly say follow the link that we just put in the chat. Go have a look at the product page. There's a link there to the example that Mark showed you in his presentation, and you can see how it is. The first load up, we've got just a holding screen just as it kind of kicks in, and just to kind of say what it is that's loading up.
Yep.
But the performance on it is, it's what you'd expect from a Central Grid. It's fast,
Yes.
blazingly fast. And yeah, as I say, it's working with all the other kind of cool stuff underneath that Centra's providing, the 140 components that are all integrated together, but then flexed around as you need to within your app. So
Yep.
yeah, definitely get up and get going with it. So awesome. Yeah, again, thank you very much.